Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Tompkins Intergovernmental Relations Committee meeting on November 9th, 2011. It's good to have you here. We will jump in. First off, are there any changes to the agenda or public comment, Katrina?
No, we haven't received anything.
Okay, and you did receive, committee members did receive the other day, the resolution, I think yesterday morning, the resolution that Deborah Dawson wrote on crypto mining. That's already on, the subject is already on the agenda, and you should have in your email the resolution language itself. So with that, and before I let Ryan get started, I just want to point out we have, as committee members have also been told, Amanda Spellacy, regional representative from Senator Majority Leader Schumer's office, may be able to join us at some unknown time during our committee meeting. So the panelists, hi Deborah, the panelists have been sort of forewarned and asked for their patience if Amanda comes in so that we could hear from her on the spot. So, and Ryan has graciously said, absolutely, he likes to hear from Amanda too. So Ryan, thank you so much for being here, Legislative Director of NYSAC, New York State Association of Counties. Always a pleasure to have you, Ryan, and take it away.
Well, great. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Chair Robertson and the Tiger Committee for inviting me to return to provide you a briefing on what's going to happen here in Albany over the course of the next couple of months and as we gear up for the legislative session in 2022. I will refrain from providing any federal updates because Amanda will brief all of you on that. And of course, there's some exciting news out of Washington, D.C. With the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. But really what we're starting to gear up for on the state advocacy side is our engagement with the Division of Budget, with Governor Hochul and her new team, and of course with the state legislature on NYSAC and county legislative priorities looking into next year. So at this point, you know, we're here in early November. We've had a meeting with the administration, a formal meeting with the administration. Of course, we've had other staff meetings. We have a couple of meetings coming up with the Division of Budget, and we engage with them from now and through the entire budget process, but the majority of which takes place from now until the executive budget is proposed, and then again after the Senate and Assembly release their one-house budgets. That's when we, continue to work with them to hone and help the governor craft and the state legislature craft next year's spending plan for the state. There's several priorities for counties this year on the funding side. Of course, coming out of the public health pandemic here with COVID-19, as we, continue to vaccinate more Americans and hopefully continue to drive down infection rates, we are taking a hard look at how we fund our public health services in New York State. And by that, I mean, we're requesting that the state make a new concerted investment in Article 6 funding, which is the flexible aid for your county public health departments. It's been underfunded for several years. We're partnering with NYSACHO. That's their number one priority. That's the organization that represents the county health commissioners and health departments. So we're working with them on that. The other big supplemental, I'm calling these supplemental priorities. The other big supplemental priority is the request for additional resources for county veteran service agencies. Tompkins County is a strong partner of Operation Greenlight. I'm excited to read all the news about what's going on across the county, but by lighting a building green or by asking a resident to light their home green, that's the initial ceremonial kickoff for Operation Greenlight. Our county veteran service departments only receive at a minimum $10,000 per year. Some counties receive what's called Joseph P. Dwyer grant funds to supplement some activities to help our veterans. but it's a very limited number of counties. So we're making a request for $14 million, which was we partnered with the New York State County Veterans Service Officers Association on this. They did the math to figure out what would be an initial equitable formula and allocation from the state budget to help them connect with more veterans. And by that, I mean recruiting people to come to New York State, retaining our veteran population, and helping connect them to employment services or any other transitional services that they may need as they come off of active duty and return home or are looking to come to New York State to set up a life post-military career. So those are our two big supplemental priorities. I want to take a moment to talk about some of our top budget priorities. So as many of you know from the conference back in September, there was a lot of discussion around the county sales tax diversion for the AIM-related payments and the Distress Hospital Fund. We're going to be working with the Hochul administration to advocate for an end of that diversion of local resources. It's a principle that can jeopardize local finances. It pins us against our municipalities, and it also, by diverting these local county sales taxes, it reduces our ability at the county level to quickly adapt and change course as we need to meet the needs of the residents of the state. So it's something that we're looking to fix at the state level. Those are really our top two priorities. The other big priority that we're going to be engaging with the Division of Budget on is the ACA EF-MAP reconciliation payments. This was something that, again, I got to tip my hat to Tompkins County because you all started this for the rest of the counties, and that was submitting a FOIL response to the state to request information on how much money is due to each of the counties for, and this is the ACA Enhanced Federal Medicaid Assistance Percentage Match. So when the Affordable Care Act was passed, there was a small enhancement for individuals who are coming into the system. The feds were matching that at a higher rate than the traditional 50% that the federal government matches for New York State Medicaid recipients. Well, historically, counties have been provided with reconciliation payments because what the state does is it withholds a portion of that money that's supposed to be given back to the counties to make sure that the bill at the end of the year when it's reconciled is made whole. So they don't want to have to come back to you and say, oh, wait a minute, we made a mistake. You owe us another, $400,000. So they withhold a percentage of that EF-MAP. That amount of money that's been withheld is somewhere, and this is an estimate, somewhere around $1 billion statewide, including New York City. So, this is federal money that's due to the counties, and we're going to be looking for the state to go ahead and pass through those dollars that are due to the counties. So those are the top three areas. There's one other priority that I want to talk about, and it's something that is a project that I've been working on for many months, and that's with Senator Samra Brook from Rochester and Assemblymember Eileen Gunther from Sullivan County. They're the chairs of the mental health committees within their respective chambers in the Senate and Assembly. They've introduced a bill that will completely overhaul the way that we help individuals who are incarcerated and deemed incompetent to stand trial. As you may remember, a couple of years ago, the state changed the way that they share the expense for restoration and 730 mental health competency exam services. It used to be split 50-50, New York State counties. 2 years ago, it was shifted to 100% counties. What this bill does is it completely fixes and brings our mental health system up to the 21st century. It's a 15-page bill, and I'd be happy to join. I could talk about this for hours. I'm happy to join another Tiger meeting and brief you all on that bill. But it's another priority of ours. It's going to save counties money, but more importantly, the bill is going to require that a portion of those savings is reinvested in the local mental health community. And it allows the counties to determine what that need looks like. Because something, the mental health crisis in Putnam County is a lot different than Erie County, is a lot different than Tompkins and Clinton County. So it allows you to control those local dollars and reinvest it in your mental health system as you see fit. Maybe you need more supportive housing beds. Maybe you need more counselors. Maybe you need more peer-to-peer supports, whatever or maybe your emergency room needs extra assistance to help manage individuals who are coming in on crisis. There's a lot of different avenues that a county could take. We just want these resources to be kept within the county so you can make that decision. So those are really our top budget issues. We're going to be providing all the county leaders, including all of you, with a copy of this and our legislative program in early December once the board of directors at NISAC meets and approves those documents. Once they are official, we'll send those out, and the DOB agenda and our budget asks and our legislative program are the baseline for all of our advocacy with the state legislature. So, we're staying busy at NISAC. There's a lot going on. The program this year is, I just finished the draft yesterday. It's 19 pages long, but we're trying to make this, I've taken a lot of feedback from legislators to heart over the last couple of years, and we're trying to make this simplified and easily digestible and a document that you can really take. And when you're engaging with your delegation, if you only want to highlight certain areas, or if you want to talk about finance issues or budget issues, it's going to be broken down in a format that's really easy to be able to take and turn around and use as you see fit. So with that, Martha, I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have.
Thank you, Ryan, for speed dialing through that agenda, through that 19-page agenda. Appreciate that. Just to be clear, you need to go at 11. We are expecting, that's still true, right?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay. All right. So if people could be relatively quick on questions or comments. Mike Lane.
Morning, Ryan.
Hey, good morning, Mike.
I wondered what you could tell us about the cannabis legislation as far as the split on the finances and what does the counties get out of that?
Sure. So the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act, MRTA, was passed last year. It will go into effect and the revenues will start flowing once the Office of Cannabis Management certifies and approves through the regular regulation process the system that will take place to allow for commercial operators to come in and start up retail dispensaries. So once that is up and running, and we're probably looking at sometime either late 2022 or early 2023, that's when the state will start receiving revenues. And it's a little different than your traditional sales tax arrangement. What it is for the counties and local governments is it's a 4%, and I'm going off of memory here, but it's a 4% tax collected by the counties and remitted to the state. And then what the state is going to do is tell the counties how much is owed to the municipalities that have opted in and allow for retail dispensing and how much is allowed to be kept by the county. The county gets 1% of that 4%. The municipalities get 3%. And that is, so let me walk you through an example. If one of your villages does not opt out by the end of this year to prohibit cannabis in their community, and I should specify that, to prohibit retail sales of cannabis, because It's illegal. It's not permissible to prohibit the use of cannabis within their community. But to prohibit retail sales, if the village says no, but the town says yes, the town would receive the 3% revenue, the village would get 0. Vice versa, if the village says, yes, we're going to allow it, and the town opts out of retail dispensary, then the village would receive the tax revenue within their jurisdiction, if that makes sense. So if there was a dispensary, if there was a retail shop in one of your villages, and the town said, no, we don't want to allow this in our community, the village can still have it. They would receive all 3% of the revenue. The town would not receive any of it. But if the town opts out by the end of this year, they can opt back in whenever they choose. But if a town, after December 31st, a town or a village or a county will not have the ability to opt out of this. And again, this is going from memory. I can give you all a little more background if you would like, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Do you know how it works with the city? As opposed to a village, for example?
Yeah, so with the city, they would receive 3% of the revenue for a retail transaction within their municipal jurisdiction, as long as they don't opt out.
Same way.
Statewide, yep.
Okay.
And the county would receive 1% of those sales within that city.
Thank you. That's helpful.
No problem.
Okay, Henry, and then Deborah, and then I have a question too.
Yes, Ryan, what's the exact time deadline for when the executive budget will be done?
That's a great question, Henry. Typically, the governor presents her budget the day after, I think it's Martin Luther King Day. So I'm guessing, if I had to put my finger on it, she will probably release her budget on January 19th or 18th. January 18th or 19th is my expected, if I had a crystal ball, that's when I would tell you the budget would be released.
Okay, and so it's worked on up until that point in terms of timing. Also, is the budget director the same budget director under Cuomo?
Yes, it is. Robert Mujica is still the budget director as of today. Yep.
Interesting.
Okay, thank you.
But
You're
often, we heard from Charlie Krasansky earlier that expectation was she would keep him on that's such a complex, such a multi-layered division. She would keep him on at least for this first year. The governor's State of the State address, though, usually lays out priorities. So a lot of the big picture is decided earlier, which is first week of January.
Yes, that's correct, Martha. Yeah, so when the governor releases her State of the State, that will give all of us an idea of some of the initiatives, some of the capital projects she's going to be pushing for and including in her budget. And yes, that'll occur sometime probably in that first week of January. I don't know if Governor Hochul is going to release early State of the State proposals as Governor Cuomo had done in the past. That's yet to be seen. We'll just keep an eye on that. Or she may just do a speech and release it all in one go ahead. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Okay. Deborah.
Yeah, thanks, Martha. It's nice to see you again, Ryan. I want to thank you again for all the help you gave us when we were struggling with what to do with our ARPA money.
Sure, of course.
That was such a fraught process, and you really helped us a lot.
Good.
I have a couple of questions about the cannabis distribution and consumption issues, largely because my husband's the mayor in our village, and we've been wrestling our way through what to do about that. Are there going to be limitations on the number of retail outlets in particular communities based on population, for example?
That's a good question, Deborah. I don't know the answer to that. Let me see if I can find you an answer. I don't know if there are or not. That might be something that's going to be determined in regulation. And so let me just say that right now, the Office of Cannabis Management, as of last week, they're in the process of developing and updating regulations with regard to the hemp industry. And they're making some tweaks to the medical side. They haven't even started the adult use commercial mainstream regulatory environment yet. So what I'm being told is there's probably, we're looking at sometime, if I had a guess, right, and this is a long time away, but I would guess sometime in 2023 when you might see a retail establishment open. Now, could they fast track regulation and really be aggressive and get this done earlier? Yes, but I think the state is deliberatively taking their time, and they want to make sure that they get this regulatory framework right the first time, so they don't have the same issues that Colorado and California experienced. So there's quite a bit of leeway. Now, that doesn't answer your question, but there's quite a bit of leeway as to when a first shop might open. But I'll see if I can get you an answer on if there's going to be, restrictions as to the number of permissible businesses within a community.
I thought there were like two in the city and two in the county, maybe.
Okay, I'll double
I know
check.
that Homer just passed a law, but they said that they'd be limited by 2 to Cortland County.
Okay.
Well, but is that a local law? And is
I don't know.
law preemptive? I mean, there's just so many questions. This is an important question only because when a municipality or town is trying to figure out whether to opt out and wait and see, if it turns out that countywide there's a restriction on the number of outlets, then by opting out even temporarily, you're pretty much locking yourself out of a market.
If I can ask that we maybe put a pin in this whole conversation, and maybe in December Ryan can pull together some more resources.
That's fair, Martha. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Mike, he brought it up.
Just one last comment on that. I threw in the chat for everyone. NISAC is holding a webinar on the 12th of Friday, and it's going to have, it may answer a lot of these questions, and certainly there'll be an opportunity for participants to ask questions too. So I just want to throw it out there. That's coming up actually on Friday. That webinar is on Friday.
Okay, that's great.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Ryan. I have a couple of questions. In terms of the priorities, I got to say, the Distress Hospital Fund, isn't that going away this year anyway? Number one.
Maybe.
The Veteran Services is important, but it's $14 million. I'm not sure how much political capital makes sense on that. I think that the FMAP reconciliation is the big kahuna here, and I hope NISAC really pushes on that. I would point out, Deborah met with Tom DiNapoli, was it last week, beginning of this week?
Beginning of last week, yeah.
And talked about this with him, and it was news to him. And I think I shared with you that I had talked a couple of months ago with Todd Sherman, used to be in the Senate Finance operation and now in the Comptroller's office. And he was more familiar, but still a little fuzzy on what has been done by the State Division of Budget to withhold the information from counties, withhold the information and withhold the payments. Department of Health has been calculating, knows how much money is owed. And this is what we found out through those foils. So it seems to me, this is real, this is structural money. It's money going forward as well. Our senators believe that the state is out of compliance. It may be something that NISAC, if you sat down with the Comptroller's office.
With Mr. Auerbach.
Yeah,
There's a gentleman in that office named Auerbach, and he's the.
Elliot Auerbach. He used to
Right.
be, yes, he used to work for Ulster County.
well, that's good. I mean, the controller is really good at identifying things like the distress hospital fund that never got a nickel until he issued a report. So this seems like they could be an ally in this. And, if I'm, planning out strategy, I think that's really got to get settled. And the back money and the forward money.
Yeah, I will just say on the distress, and I agree 100% with you, Martha. I would say on the distress hospital fund, that fight, unfortunately, is going to be a huge fight for us because the governor and division of budget just released their mid-year financial plan update. And in the financial plan update, even though Part ZZ of Chapter 59 of the laws of 2021 states that the distress hospital fund would sunset by April 1st of 2022. The financial plan includes within the 5-year financial plan, it includes the distress hospital fund continuing in existence. So we're going to have to buy back that sunset, which means the legislature is already starting at a disadvantage when it comes to the distress hospital fund. So that's unfortunately, it's not a given that is going to sunset. It's actually going to be a huge fight to get that to sunset. Now, the good news on that though is, if you'll remember, so it's a $250 million diversion of county and New York City sales tax revenue. 200 of the 250 million comes out of New York City's pocketbook. So, there's going to be a new mayor coming in January. I am working to engage with his transition team now. And this will certainly be at the top of my agenda to see and try and nail him down as to, where does this fall within the city's priorities? Because that'll be helpful for all of us. But with regard to the ACA payments, yes, it is one of the top 2 priorities for NISAC this budget.
Okay. All right. I get it. So just in your presentation, I mean, not that the public health and veterans are both very, very important. I just wanted to not have that drop off.
Yeah.
And since you were talking about mental health, let me also toss out something that we started working on about the mental health wellness court. I know I got 30 seconds here. We're the only county in 6th Judicial District that has a mental health wellness court, and we instituted it on our own. The state is apparently very interested in expanding these courts. We have asked the state for support of one position, a coordinator to make the referrals go well, help people go through their systems. And maybe I should just bring you up to speed on this separately because we don't have time, but we're hoping that OCA will support this position and think even more broadly that they should put money behind establishing these courts throughout the state, because ours has been tremendously effective in keeping people from being the frequent flyers that we hear about, the people who simply, they can't live in the community without significant support. And this court has really been able to help folks. So that's another area that we're trying to work on.
Yeah, if there's a resolution, Martha, or material that you all have, feel free to send that over to me and we can engage with OCA as well. It sounds like a great program. I would love to learn a little bit more.
Okay, great. Would that also be Patrick Cummings at NISAC or?
Yes, I was just going to say, if you could add Pat on that would be great too.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. So it looks like it's 11:01 here on my computer. You turn into a pumpkin.
Well, if anyone ever has questions, you all know how to reach me. And I'm happy to join and provide an update whenever you find it to be helpful. So thank you all again.
I think you just secured yourself another invitation, Ryan. Thank you so much.
All right, take care, everybody.
All right.
Thanks,
have a
Ryan.
wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Well, clearly we do need a lot of conversation about cannabis. I was going to ask, I assume the state is taking 4% also, right? Does anybody know?
No, they get 9%.
Yeah, they get a much
It's a
bigger chunk.
13% tax.
Oh, of course. All right.
On the other hand, they're the ones that have to set up the regulatory structure to oversee this stuff. So let them have it.
Well, I'm sure they're going to earn it, right? So, hi, Leslin. I see Leslin's on here. As we said before, Zoe Nelson was not able to make it last minute. Her kid, let me see if I can find her email. Her kids are, one kid is home and another one is on day one of a remote quarantine week. So she sent the news that my updates are the Division of Budget is beginning their process of constructing an executive budget. It should be released by January 18th this year. So that confirms the timing that Ryan mentioned. Regarding the federal infrastructure funding, thank you, New York senators and them and their teams for their hard work. Most flow-through funding that is to be administered through an executive agency, for example, DOT, will be allocated through the state's annual budget process. Funds allocated via a state authority, for example, NYSERDA or NYPA, does not necessarily have to adhere to the state budget cycle. So stay tuned. I guess that means a certain amount of this federal infrastructure bill will come through the state. If you have plans or proposals, the governor's regional representative, Carly Norton, and ESD regional rep Bud Sweet are good places to start. The governor's office is checking into options for capital funding for childcare centers in response to a question from our last session. If I get a lead, I will forward it to Martha. If there are any questions, please let us know. So that's from Zoe Nelson in Albany. Mike Lane?
Not on that point, Martha, but on Ryan's point about the mental health bills that they're working on. You know, one of our biggest vulnerabilities is the lack of psychiatrists and psychiatric workers. And I would hope maybe we could get a message to him that we really need help somehow finding those people, attracting those people, paying for those people for our mental health department.
Mm-hmm. So true. I think that's just a really big need around the state. So we can mention that. Deborah?
Yeah, apropos of Mike's comment, one of the things we'll be considering in our special BCP meeting is redlining the psychiatric nurse practitioner positions for the health department. I spoke briefly with Jeremy Porter yesterday, and it's just become impossible to hire healthcare, mental health care, anything like that. People are getting poached for unbelievably large sums of money. And the red line ask, as I understand it from Jeremy, is going to be $20 an hour increase. So that's a lot of money.
Well, thank you.
Help with that.
Thank you for that update. So let's see, we have Kristen here, Kristen Adams from Washington, and I believe we have Amanda. Is that you there, Amanda?
I'm here.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you very much for joining us. So we have our Washington powerhouse team here. Amanda, can you, how much time do you think you have for us?
I've got about a half an hour till my next adventure.
All right. Well, Kristen, I hope, I know we communicated earlier, and I hope you don't mind if we start out with Amanda here. So.
No, I definitely would be happy to yield to Amanda and chime in afterwards.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate that. Amanda, Welcome. It's
And
been a
I-
while. I
Hi.
can't imagine what you're doing with your time.
I've been sitting around eating bonbons and watching
Yes.
the world go by.
We know. So how
So
are,
I
how's,
just have to ask quick because I'm at the disadvantage of just being on the phone, so I can't see who else is with us. And I the audio is a little bad. Who else on the DC side do I have with us today?
Kristen, you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kristen Adams. I'm the Director of Federal Relations for Cornell. So I
Oh,
work
hi,
for Cornell,
Kristen.
but
Yeah,
I'm in
yeah.
base
I
DC.
didn't hear who it was.
Yeah, no worries.
Hello. But good to hear your voice again. So Martha, is it better? Do you all want to ask questions? I mean, do you want me to give you like a quick sort of, I don't know, overview of sort of what's happening, and then we can dive into specifics of who's interested in what, rather than me just ramble on with 1,000 different facts and figures and all that stuff?
Yeah, a quick overview. I think in particular, folks probably interested to know how will money flow from the infrastructure bill?
And how
And-
much and for what?
Yeah, we're also looking, I mean, some of that's available online, but sort of the mechanics of how does this move out will be of great interest.
All right. So, real quickly, we have, as we followed forever, I mean, there's two major sort of legislative items that everyone has been tracking and following that are sort of part of, President Biden's Build Back Better initiative. One is actually referred to as the Build Back Better, which is the more, it's got 1,000 different names, the people infrastructure, human infrastructure, everything but, physical infrastructure bill, I call it what you will. And then we have the actual infrastructure piece. For those who are following along at home, I think sometimes we are so bogged down in all of the fast-paced things that are happening, some of the negativity, all of that we don't stop and really take a minute to digest good things that happened. And so this weekend, with seemingly very little fanfare, something that has not happened in a long, long time occurred, and that is that we're actually going to have a real infrastructure week. So the House passed President Biden's infrastructure bill, and it is headed to him for signature and will become law. And that's a massive, massive investment. This is the single largest federal investment in our literal infrastructure that we have had in decades and decades. And in fact, when we talk about some pieces like bridges and roads, this is the biggest investment we will see in that type of infrastructure investment since we started the highway system back in the Eisenhower years. So $1.2 trillion is part of that large package, and it's a really big deal. I won't quote our president when he was vice president, but I think his words there might have been apropos. So that's huge, and we're really excited. And so as that is happening, we will digest that. But then obviously we have the other side of the infrastructure investment that still is being worked through, and we can, if time permits, I mean, we certainly can. And I'll watch the clock to see when my actual colleagues filter into the other meeting I have to go to. We can get into some more of that, but just for a timeline of what to expect. The House is the Speaker has said that they intend to have a vote on the Build Back Better agenda, and it is her desire to see that move through the House before Thanksgiving. I'm not going to get bogged down on dates at this point because obviously we see a lot of things happening. It's a developing process, but the intention on the Speaker's part is to see that pass. Senator Manchin has asked that this bill, which is, I think we're at 1.7 trillion. Be scored by the CBO. So, it is true that there are some parts that have already been scored, but, it is quite an arduous process, and I won't bore you with some of the complexities of doing so, but that is something that has to kind of work its way through the system once the House passes their bill and sends it back. And, we hope that all is done as expeditiously as possible. And in the meantime, because our dance card isn't full enough, we have a continuing resolution that's funding the government that expires on the 3rd of December. So we need to fund our fiscal 2022 year. We also need to, at some point, deal with the debt limit and raising that limit. Although I will not, a specific date. It's looming. I don't have a specific date that I would commit to because some of that calculation, the Federal Reserve is watching that and keeping us informed, is impacted by fluctuations in the market, and we've seen some good trends in the market. So it's there and it needs to be addressed. So that is also something we have to do. Hopefully, in the space of while that fund is going on, we will pass the NDAA, which is an important piece of legislation every year. And then also, we would very much like to see USECO, which for our friends from Cornell on the line, that is something that's very interesting and helpful to the work that they do, but it impacts the lives of so many, and I can talk about that later, but we've got that too. So that's a quick overview of what's been going on, what should be going on, and hopefully what will go on. On the actual infrastructure bill, you know, there's a lot. We've got about, I don't even know where to start. It's so big. We've got over $1 trillion that's flowing into some of these very key components that we all know and think about when we talk about infrastructure. So that's going to be boost to our airports, boost to transit, you know, mass transit of all kinds, passenger rail, broadband, highways, bridges, clean water infrastructure, and a few other things mixed into that. On the New York specific side, we're going to see about, let's see, I guess you know, let's start with some of the stuff that I actually have numbers that are specific to Tompkins County. So a lot of this money is not new money. A lot of it is going to be reauthorizations or plus ups or additions to existing programs. And therefore, no pun intended, the infrastructure that is there for that money to flow is expected to remain largely unchanged. So I don't have specifics, like if we want to talk about broadband, I can't tell you quite yet how you're going to access those funds or how you go about doing so. But broadly, what I can say is that in most cases, the program or the means that's already been there and working is just going to receive more funds, which by nature of more funds flowing into it decreases the competitive nature of it and increases the accessibility for all those who want to participate. So a lot of it will probably flow to the states. It's not going to be specific earmarks per se for, you know, different projects that communities may have, but you will go through the traditional mechanisms of how you may have funded those or been discouraged to pursue them, knowing that there would never be enough resources to kind of make it around. But in the space of some of those reauthorization or mechanisms that exist, I can tell you things like the Ithaca Airport is going to see, Ithaca Tompkins Regional will see about you don't call yourself regional, you're international now, 7.1 million-ish in new monies flowing in. And that's in addition to things that have already been seen through the American Rescue Plan and all those other previous resources. I also have a figure for transit. So TCAT will be looking at about $17.8 million of new funds to help with things like the acquisition of zero emission buses to provide expanded services and to increase accessibility for all who need those resources. So those are two really exciting things. Those are the only two actual dollar figures at this point that I can quote. Those will be going out publicly through some releases that we'll be putting out shortly. I don't think we've put them out yet. So that's really exciting.
So I just heard Deborah decide not to leave the TCAT board when she heard that.
No, that's fine. I'm just happy for them. The sooner we electrify the fleet, the better. Doesn't solve the facility problem, but we'll take it. Thank you, Amanda.
Okay, go ahead, Amanda.
Well, you know, and I like to think, just like when we talk about the state and local funds and things like that, you know, while certain funding streams have specificity with how they may be used and parameters, when you put that sort of in the broader ecosystem of how an entity has to fund and function, the fungibility that then kind of is created is that if your traditional, you know, funds are not needing to be allocated for, let's say, fleet maintenance or fleet upgrades, you may have just freed up a handful of millions of dollars that you might be able to reapportion into a project that is not a named, you know, permissible use of these new monies. So, you know, I encourage people to think about things like that, and hopefully some of that will come into play.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I can go through these buckets of money. I don't know if that's interesting. I mean, maybe I'll just do like a quick top-line comment on some of these. So we're going to have monies coming into New York. There's, you know, on the highway specific, so bridges and roads, there is, and just to kind of put in perspective, every 5 years-ish, we've done like a transportation reauthorization bill. The last one was done in 2015. It was the FAST Act. That was about $48 billion. And so this one, for those kinds of projects is $89 billion. So it's double our traditional, 5-year spending, which is phenomenal. I mean, it's long overdue. We know we have crumbling roads and other pieces of infrastructure everywhere, but we'll see about 1.9 billion coming into New York for, let me make sure I said that right. I think 9 billion. I just go look at my notes. Yep. 1.9 billion for new bridges and repairs, and that will help with replacements, new things that have to come in. And additionally, there's going to be a $12.5 billion fund. It's a national competitive fund. I don't know if we'll break that up by states yet or how it may be, but there will be another $12.5 billion in new money in addition to that specific dollar figure I quoted for all of the states to compete for new projects. So that's exciting. So it's like a $13.5 billion top line for federal investment in bridges and roads. And, we have, for example, we have like 17,000 in some bridges in New York and almost over 7,000 miles of highway that are in really bad shape just in New York alone. That also there'll be more money going into the RISE program, which City of Ithaca previously had applied a few times for. It used to be called Tiger, and I think during the Trump years it was Build. I think that's what it was. But those funds are going to get replenished. There's money going into Infrastructure Rebuilding America, which is a competitive fund to fund transportation projects to help move freight operations, which we all know that's probably pretty important given what we're all staring at right now with supply chain issues. There's a new pilot program, which really I don't think is something that would impact Tompkins County. But if you think about what Syracuse is going, the I-81 debate about how best to position that, there is an effort to make an investment in a pilot program to help communities study how, highways have divided communities and how they can better create unification to stop stymieing economic development and opportunities within communities. Something we're really excited about, which is a topic that my boss has taken a real strong lead in, is investment in our electric vehicle infrastructure. Needing to move us from the reliance on combustible engines to a more green and safe alternative. And so there's about $7.5 billion to invest in the build out of their national network for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. In addition, about $5 billion dedicated to replacing, which is part of what we talked about with TCAT, replacing our transit system's current vehicle structure with zero emission vehicles. So that's really exciting. There's a big investment for high-speed broadband and internet, and it's a historic investment. The top line, it's about $65 billion to invest in broadband, and we're going to see over $42 billion going into broadband deployment. So grants to states to help close the divide that exists between underserved and unserved communities because we don't have the infrastructure. Contained in that, there's also some more programs to help invest in expanding. During COVID, there was some emergency relief funds that were created to help seniors and low-income families and others be able to access high-speed internet. So when those funds run out, there's a program to stand that back up to make sure that everybody has affordable access to internet and work to deliver on the president's pledge that every household in America will have access to high-speed internet. There's also $2 billion going into the USDA Reconnect Loan and Grant Program, which you're probably familiar with. And I think it's like 2.8, give or take, $billion in another, what they call a digital equity inclusion program, so that states can provide digital literacy education and training to those who, whether it's seniors or, again, lower income residents and community members who don't necessarily have the savviness or have had the opportunity to develop those skill sets, but critically need to be able to function in a digital world. So providing education for that. There's also some money for cybersecurity. I don't think you all had any, unless I'm forgetting a story, had any direct issues with hacks and records being held hostage, but we have seen throughout New York State countless communities, local governments, hospitals, school districts who were plagued by these cyber attacks and ransom demands. And so there's about $2 billion in this initiative going to provide a competitive grant program for assistance to state and local governments to shore up their resources. That fund has a carve out that's dedicated to vulnerable rural communities who, need even more attention because they lack some of the resources and skill sets to best protect themselves. And then there's also about $100 million response support fund to help communities and other impacted entities recover in the wake of these attacks. And I think the last thing that kind of sticks out to me is funding for pollution and clean water. And so there's from the pollution side, there's $3.5 billion over, I think it's 5 years, for remediation accounts with the it's called the Hazard Substance Superfund site. $2.5 billion-ish for brownfield competitive grant program. There's another 1.3 billion. It might be 5. I can't remember, for state and tribal assistance to help with brownfield cleanup. And then there's a good swath of money for clean water initiatives in New York. So monies to, and nationally, but obviously we're focused on New York. So monies to help with water contamination, pipe replacement, PFAS eliminating. Billions will go into drinking water in the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And of that, something that Senator Schumer pushed for is 49% of that will actually be grants and forgivable loans. So we're trying to eliminate the chances of debt service being taken on so that we can have clean and safe water. There's probably more I'm missing, but I think that's kind of a good quick snapshot of what the infrastructure bill is all about. Are there any questions?
Sure. Just quickly, thank you, Amanda. It sounds like then most of this goes through the state. Will our staff be searching, websites to figure out if there are grants to apply for, if there's a competitive process for any of this? Is there any?
I think that I don't have a lot of specificity on the hows quite yet, and I don't want to, mislead anyone. The intention is for the sake of effectiveness, is obviously to get these funds literally to hit the streets as quickly as possible. And in order to do so, reinventing the wheel is probably counterproductive to doing that. So mechanisms and funding programs that already exist, that you're already familiar of, will still be there. They're just going to be stood up and replenished with significant more dollars. I think that as we, the next couple of weeks, get the bill signed into law, and we'll start to probably have some more visibility on how these programs will be stood up and how the monies will flow. And so, we'll want to check back and kind of talk through that. But I would assume, and something that we certainly have been an advocate all along, is that, it does nobody any good if this money is not moving in as easy a fashion as possible. So I think the goal will be to have a minimal burden on those who are trying to access the funds. Obviously, if they utilize a lot of the state, quote, infrastructure, which I suspect will be the case, some of it will be incumbent upon the states to use their communication infrastructures to help. So I think that, a little bit of what you're thinking, a little bit of what I'm thinking is probably, speaking to where the intention is moving, and we'll have to revisit more of the hows once we get this moving forward.
And one more, how about workforce? I know some folks are a little nervous that we won't have the workforce to do all this work. Is there money to support training programs?
I don't have a great answer for that. And you mean training programs to train people at the county level to sort of like carve out, like you saw in the state and local aid, where they said, okay, some of these funds can be used to stand up personnel to kind of manage this. That's what you're asking?
Yeah. I mean, there's, we have folks who we're trying to find a match between people with the ability, the willingness to work, but don't have necessarily the skills to be on a highway crew yet, for example.
Oh,
So,
I see what you're saying. Sorry, I thought you were asking about trying to navigate the programs. I don't quite know where in these buckets those types of things exist. Workforce training. I think that when you talk about economic development, you talk about investment, clearly having the right workforce to carry out, whether it's in another conversation, you're talking about standing up industries and how do you have a workforce that's trained to support the industry you're trying to, bring into a community versus this. That's always part of the discussion. I don't know specifically in any of these exact pots I talk to, like, for example, we talk about the investment going into new bridges and roads, if there is provisions allocated for training for people to be able to perform the duties and the jobs necessary to build those bridges and roads. I'll see what I can tease out of that, but I know that broadly that is something that is always part of the conversation, to make sure that we have, the workforce investment dollars too, that may come from another pot, or there may be an allocation once we see some of the guidances that come out of transportation and such for these funds.
Okay.
So remind me, I'll make a note and we can revisit that.
Thank you very much. Questions from committee? Kristen, you look.
I was just going to chime in, and Amanda, you probably know about this more than I do, but I think there's like a $10 million program for grants to institutions of higher education, where it basically says that we can establish like training and assessment centers to help educate and train like technicians. But I think it's very specific to implementing modern building technologies. Like, I don't think it's like a general thing. I think it's a very small pot of money. And I'm unclear how that will even funnel down. But
yeah,
there is.
I have seen that. I don't know exactly what it pertains to. And I maybe I was wrong. I thought Martha's question was more, actual boots on the ground to build roads. But I think that the program that you're citing, some of the historical things we have seen included in like the American Rescue Plan and some of the conversations that are part of the Build Back Better agenda, there are carve outs to acknowledge that there needs to be workforce development. So it may be entirely true. For example, and I'm sometimes thankful that I don't have to fully embrace all of state operations as well. But obviously within the state DOT, when they get their CHIPS and their BIF money and all those kinds of things that flow to them, they have a workforce that they have to stand up to kind of manage and execute some of those programs. So there may be, just as a normal happenstance for that particular program, an allocation that is allowed to be directed to workforce development. That very well may be just the case, that I don't have something new created in here. But I will see if I can get any guidance or specificity on that. As I said, I think some of this will be an evolving learning, and I mean, this stuff that I've just all shared with you and that I'm digesting is very top line at this point.
Thanks, Amanda. Anybody other questions for Amanda or Kristen? Really, we covered everything.
I think we're in shock.
One other question. The voting rights, I know there's several voting rights bills. I'll go to you in a second, Mike. And you and I talked earlier, the bill that Senator Manchin actually helped to draft. Do you see any prospects for that?
Well, was it last week? And I have to apologize. I feel like the last year is all gelled into 1 week. So when I think last week, it could have been last month. In the more recent weeks, we'll leave it at that, we did bring, that bill was brought back up. So Senator Schumer brought another bill to the floor. It was what Senator Manchin had worked to develop, and was convinced that he would be able to bring 10 of his Republican friends to vote, and not one of them voted for it. So, we have continued to push forward on a very important, sacrosanct, right or protection to our sacrosanct rights. It's something that Senator Schumer will, and you may see sometimes when there are votes on the floor, he changes his vote after he votes in support, and that's so he can reserve the right to bring something back up again. So I know people ask me that all the time. Clearly we are running down a path where we are, the options of how to move things forward when it is so clearly demonstrated that it is not the interest of our minority party friends to protect these rights, that there are less and less paths forward. Math is not on our side, but we are not deterred in continuing to have that fight and to encourage our colleagues to consider other options. We will not abandon the fight.
Great, thank you very much, Mike Lane.
Hi, Amanda. I just wondered. I know you don't know all the mechanism for getting money out, but in the past, water and sewer money came out in the rural areas through the Farm Service Agency. But prior to that, it came out through contracting with the New York State DEC to provide grant funding years and years ago. Be kind of interested to know how this bill will make this money happen, because we do need water and sewer upgrades in the rural areas.
Yes, it continues to be, obviously a big need, and part of why when we did the American Rescue Plan with the state and local aid piece, that, there was an actual explicit carve out and direction that those funds could be utilized for those resources, because, one of the things I think that my boss hears relentlessly as he travels the state is how important those investments are. So some of the things that I talked about are the more like clean water and replacement of pipes and things like that. There are some authorizations of funds included in the BIF bill, but they are not full-blown appropriations, but they are things like reauthorizing previous programs that have provided some resources to help in those spaces, like the wastewater efficiency grant pilot program is one that through the EPA, and I have to read up on it because again, I'm drinking through a fire hose and learning a lot of the stuff as we go. I can send you, if you would like, if it's of interest, the some of the guidances, like I don't know, guys, sorry, some of the subparts of this bill that have the reauthorizations for those programs in there. I don't know the mechanisms. I don't want to speak it to the mechanisms of how each of these things could or would be funded, because I'm just not read up on them enough yet, to be perfectly honest with you. But you can take a look. We can certainly next meeting talk more about it once I get a chance to sit with colleagues as we drill down on some more of those things.
That would be very nice. The city of Ithaca, for example, waste treatment plant is into huge costs for repairs of its major operation of its digester, for example. And it really needs money.
Not alone.
And Samantha, which reminds me of the earmark process, where does that stand now? Because I know that the reauthorization of the highway, I think, was done, but I don't know if that was with new money. So you had the whole process of earmarks that we discussed over the summer.
Yes, the congressionally directed spending, the
Right.
earmarks 2.0. So as I think I shared with you, I know I talked with the city, I've talked with Leslin. There were a few projects that were included in the markups that came out of committees. Now, I don't want to be too rudimentary, so if you can tell me to move on if I'm telling you something you already know. But basically, there are multiple steps that have to happen from the inception of the earmark process, where a member collects requests from stakeholders to us having an actual fiscal year funded bill that would include these. And so the first step was us collecting the requests. The second step was us working with Senator Schumer to decide what he wanted to submit to the various committees that have jurisdiction over the spending bills that comprise the federal budget. And so many of the projects that we received from Tompkins County were submitted. The next step was the committees themselves to do markups, which is a fancy way of saying them to evaluate all of the requests that they have received from, in our case, from 100 senators, to decide which items that they would include in the their mark, which is the next iteration of that spending bill. So those have happened. And now we sit and wait to see what we will actually be doing with how to put together that budget. So in theory, October 1st, we should have been in a new fiscal year, and all of the spending bills that comprise the federal budget would be passed and we'd be off to the races. We did not do that. So we passed continuing resolution, which is in force until December the 3rd, and that holds funding levels to keep everything operational and functional at the current levels that they are for 2021, which would not have included any of the congressional directed spending. What will happen, I do not know. Obviously, we do need to have an extension of that CR or passage of the budget. I think the longer the process if we were to get another long-term CR, I think it makes the prospects of the bills with the congressionally directed spending in them be a little less likely to prevail, because at some point we're probably talking about having some kind of omnibus, and in the interest of being expeditious, sometimes not all that stuff gets lumped together. Sometimes it does. So the short answer to that is we don't know. The good news is that the project, so let's see, there was funding for the convention center. There's funding for the Greater Ithaca's Activity Center. There is funding for a grid. I'm going to remember, I'm not a scientist. A grid transition to methane, I believe, for electrical needs for the city of Ithaca, and also in Dryden, a recreational trail. Tompkins County had funding for, which is a pretty good batting average in my past years and collectively, so that's great. Those are all in current marks. We just don't know if that will become part of the final federal budget or not. So the good news is you're still in the game, but there's many innings to play.
Got it. So if you are, I think that grid transition, that was for the wastewater plant, not, I'm not mistaken.
I have to look.
Anyway.
I don't know. It was submitted by the city. I don't remember. I got to be honest with you. I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. I don't recall where the grid conversion would apply to, but I know that it's an exciting opportunity to reduce our carbon footprint. So.
Okay, great. And Leslie's just cheering there behind her screen. She's here on the call, so thank you. But all of those, if there's only a continuing resolution, not a full budget passage, that process probably goes away.
I mean, I really don't want to speculate. There's no hard and fast rule that any of those things have to happen or not happen. I mean, we have to fund the government. That has to happen.
Right.
We have various mechanisms that we will do that. How long it takes, I think the longer that the process plays out, it just reduces the likelihood that we will have earmarks. I think one of the challenges is that, we kind of started and set up this process very late in the fiscal year compared to what we have normally seen. I think it was like June when we started taking them. And part of that was because while in the House, all of the leadership was in agreement to include congressionally directed spending, the Senate side, there was not that same agreement. And so ultimately what happened is Senator McConnell didn't support them, but didn't prohibit them. And so, not every member of his submitted congressionally directed requests. So one could say there's a little less skin in the game on that side to fight for them. Although, half of the membership is certainly still has a vested interest in seeing these happen. So, there's that dynamic. And then there's just the reality of the longer that the process plays out, the more, I guess the less time there exists to deliberate these things, and the movement toward having a giant omnibus where everything is lumped together. The goal is all of it gets passed with an up or down kind of vote. And if there is some controversies contained in them, that may become more challenging. I don't want to speculate on anything. It's sort of like a choose your own adventure at this point. You step one and then there's 4 options before you. So we'll just all have to stay tuned. And the best thing I can say is that you're still in the game.
That sounds great. Really good news on those 4 projects. Thank you so very much. And we've really used up a lot of your time. We are deeply grateful. Thank you so very much. Any last thoughts or questions from committee members?
Just many thanks to Senator Schumer and his staff. Thank you.
Yes, we are delighted that there's a champion there that we have access through you, which is really a privilege. We really appreciate it. Kristen, did you have anything you want to ask Amanda before she disappears?
No, I'm just going to echo the thanks. We are very grateful to Senator Schumer and all his efforts for New York, for the colleges and universities in New York too. So Amanda, we appreciate him being a champion for our requests. So thank you again.
Of course. And just for my homework for follow-ups, Mike, I have to see what I can get my colleagues to pull together on the wastewater front. obviously it's my own interest as well, but see if I can get some write-ups or bullets to share with you on programs that are going to be reauthorized, not necessarily appropriated, but reauthorized. And then anything I can find on sort of workforce support and development to try to execute all of the resources that we will be funneling everybody's way in the bill.
Sounds
Did I miss
great.
anything?
Fantastic. Thank you so very much, Amanda. Great to have
Perfect.
you.
Well, call me with anything. Thanks, everybody.
All right. So have
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
All right. And Kristen, whatever else additional time you have, we really thank you for being so patient here.
Yeah, of course. No, I mean, hearing from Amanda's, I would say, much better than hearing from me at times. So, I'm happy to yield to her at any time. The only things I would add in general, obviously, we're very pleased with the passage of the infrastructure bill. There's certain things that Cornell's paying attention to that probably would also help benefit the community. Things like there's more money for the university transportation centers, which Cornell is one of them. There's more money for Great Lakes, I'm sorry, not Great Lakes, for the Sea Grant program to help with, marine debris prevention, which is, again, Cornell's the Sea Grant member for the Northeast. So these are things that we think will also ultimately also funnel down to the community, or funnel down to help the community, I should say, in general. But more importantly, I think we're pleased to see the passage because it does give us the way to hopefully get things like the Build Back Better bill passed, or even other legislation like NDAA, and things like in the Build Back Better bill, they had the adjustment to like the state and local income tax cap, so raising that, and more investment in research and immigration, and even other tax issues that I think, again, not only would benefit Cornell, but would benefit the local community. I'm happy if there's other specific legislation, but really I feel like Amanda did such a wonderful job at covering everything that there's probably not that much additional I can state.
Thank you, Kristen. Love to hear those thoughts. Any questions from committee? I'm interested. So you did go to Bill, but did you say NDAA? Was that one of the things you?
So
What
the
is that?
National Defense Authorization Act. Sorry, what's the last A? It's an annual thing that they do, and it's authorizing defense, but also non-defense spending things in regards to research funding from the Department of Defense, which Cornell does receive some of that. So actually part of the funding we're hoping to get is like the use of like geothermal energy, which you wouldn't think is a big thing in Ithaca, but Cornell's trying. So again, stuff like that. So there's other aspects, and I have to admit, the defense portion's not really my portfolio, so I don't know all the specifics, but I know that this is something that the university community has pushed for many years, and we're very invested in passage of this. It's also an opportunity for things to, a lot of times it's legislation because it's so routine that it happens yearly that people will tag on things like cybersecurity or even broadband, more infrastructure in there. So, it's still TBD. It also has to be passed by that December 3rd deadline. So this is a magical deadline that everything happens to happen, but we'll see. I mean, what we have heard in general, and it may be different than others, is that, the government funding, there's probably going to be another continuing resolution through the new year. When in the new year, still TBD, but most likely that they will not pass any sort of appropriations bills. However, the one thing about DC that I always say is predictable is that it's unpredictable. So, that could change in 5 minutes, it could be something different. Just as an FYI, but that's what we are hearing. But we are hoping that as things are getting moving, like with infrastructure passing, maybe if they actually get to the vote on the Build Back Better in the House next week, which would set up a vote in the Senate, things could progress. It's just in our experience and what we're hearing, it's more likely that there's going to be another continuing resolution to sort of pass the pass the appropriations, requests down, and hopefully they will actually have some sort of official full funding bills in the future.
Thank you, Kristen. Deborah?
Yeah, that's discouraging, Kristen.
Sorry to be the bearer of bad news.
No, that's all right. We can't fire you. But I'm curious to know what happens. All this money that's appropriated in the IIJA, the Infrastructure Act. If we're on a continuing resolution, does that money go out, or is it held up until we have a budget?
Yeah, no, so it's not held up in this instance because of the fact it's a separate legislation that was already passed with funding in it.
Okay.
So there's some programs in there. I'm going to get this wrong, but the like an ARPA-I, so the Advanced Research Projects for Infrastructure, there's not funding assigned to it, but the program's authorized. So that program would be held up, for example. But normally when the programs have the actual funding, this passed with legislation with the funding associated. So those will funnel through. It's really the impact of how, so for example, University Transportation Centers, that funding, they have this increase, which is separate, and it kind of gets in the weeds of how like the federal agencies really have to do this, but there is going to be a separate pot of money that they will have as an increase based on their prior year funding. That's what's set in the continuing resolution. So say they were supposed to get another increase, that actually wouldn't happen right now until appropriations bills are passed. Does that help clarify? It's a little,
as much as I need it to be clear. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry to be bear bad news. I mean, I'm hoping I'm wrong.
No, well, but actually it's good news in the sense that the bulk of the stuff that's in this infrastructure bill will go through.
Yes, and I mean, we've heard the same thing that Amanda's saying, which is I think a lot of it does go to the state and then funnel down in order to get it out quicker. But I know that there are options. If I'm reading the bill correctly, there's some things where it says, the state gets funds and then there's sub grants awarded to certain communities or like, other eligible entities. So I would pay attention to that. I know Zoe mentioned in the email, which I think Martha, you already noted, that there's people at the state who you should probably check in with on potential sub grants or additional funds. As I'm not as familiar with that sort of process, but I do know that I think a lot of money is going to try to be pushed out to the state as quickly as possible.
This whole thing about December 3rd, sometimes the more stuff is packaged into one deadline, the easier it is to pass it. It's like, oh, fine, I'll just say yes, or well, I like this thing, but I don't like that thing. But there's enough, everybody can find something that they can say, that's why I voted for this thing. So, might provide cover, I really wanted such and such to pass, so I voted for the debt limit, that kind of discussion.
That would be, I think, very welcome news. I think the issue is with such small margins. Some Republicans and Democrats are not agreeing on the debt limit, and that's what's, we're hearing that's a big holdup. And so whether or not they separate that out, that's always a potential. It's interesting as it is, it seems like December 3rd, maybe a little farther away, but there's really not that many legislative days left on the calendar. So getting something done by December 3rd, my guess is even if I just can't see an appropriations bill passing by December 3rd, but they could be like a short-term one that's just for like 2 weeks if they're close to negotiations, still something to pass before the end of the year. Again, I'm hoping I'm wrong.
Well, so
are we.
It's a lot. It's mind-boggling.
I'll be the first to admit that I'm wrong if it happens. So no worries at all.
Maybe I just kind of look for that little ray of sunshine to just hang on to. So
yeah, hopefully
trying to stay hopeful. All right, Kristen, we've taken a lot of your time as well. Any other questions for Kristen? All right, thank you so very much. Say hi to Diane for us. We really appreciate having you here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day. Okay, let's take a deep breath. All right, deep breath. We have our resolution. So I have resolution number 10515, a resolution urging prompt passage of New York State Assembly Bills A 07389 and A 07768, an enactment of their provision into law. Can I get a motion for that? Moved by Deborah, seconded by Henry. Deborah, thank you so very much for drafting this. This is really to the point. Well done. Very, very clear. Thank you so very much. Would you want to talk about it, or are there any questions, discussion?
This is just the second prong of the resolution that we passed at our last ledge meeting. There's a regulatory piece to this proof of work electricity problem, and there's a legislative piece. And this is simply a resolution in support of the legislative piece that was championed by Anna and discussed by her at previous Tiger meetings.
Any questions from folks? Yeah, I think this is moving along. We haven't heard whether there's a Senate companion bill for either one.
Yeah, I didn't find one on the Assembly website, usually
Okay.
cross-referenced.
Okay, great. I think this is going to be a good step forward. Glad that she's got a legislation on it. Are ready to vote? All right, Deborah,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Henry,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
and I'm a yes, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Deborah. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right, my report, I will just mention redistricting. I did put my testimony into your packet there. It's, pretty much what the resolution that we passed turned into a piece of testimony. At the hearing, I was asked a couple of questions, and I sort of did the best. They wanted to know if how important or was the Cortland connection. I said, well, we really, if it's possible, we know that there are going to be changes going on. And if it's possible, one of those changes to include us or bring Cortland into the districts that we're in or whatever, that would be preferable. The ballot measures on the ballot last week, I'm sure you folks followed that the one that related to the redistricting calendar failed. I didn't get a chance to look up the exact dates, but what that'll mean is I believe that instead of reporting to the legislature by January 1st, the Independent Redistricting Commission is required to report by January 15th. Now, I don't know if, I suppose they could report earlier if they want, but I don't know at any rate. So that moves that part of the calendar back 2 weeks. And with our June primary, obviously it squeezes everything in terms of when the final maps will get approved and when people will be able to figure out where they might run if they wanted to run. I did hear Chair Imamura on the news, and even though a lot of folks were saying that when the Republicans and Democrats each came up with their separate maps, a lot of people were saying, oh, well, we'll never come to an agreement. He was really, this is just last week, and he was pretty optimistic that they would be able to come up with a unified set of maps that based on getting, the public feedback that they get, then they'll sort of go back, they sort of issued 2 sets to show people the parameters. So the, maybe extremes, you might say, of 2 different sets of maps, and that they will go back and really negotiate and try to sort out and come to one set of maps. you know, that was what he was saying on a news program. So we'll see what actually happens.
There's
So-
a Pollyanna in every crowd.
I guess so. So, right. On the Office of Court Administration item, the Wellness and Recovery Court, I did meet together with Judge, with Frank Krupa and with Judge Peacock and Judge Miller, and with Porter Kirkwood, who is the executive administrator of the 6th Judicial District, and someone from his Human Resources Division as well. Mr. Kirkwood was extremely positive about our court. He really was, and he kept saying, you're doing exactly the right thing by meeting with me. We said, is there anything else we should do? Any other lobbying? He said, no, you've done what you had to do. It's kind of now up to me to try to push. Remember, this is to push for funding for our resource coordinator in our court. He did say the way OCA works is that there's one established set of lines of employment lines, and they are not able to add any new lines. They can only shift them. So I thought that seems odd. And I thought, what if, does OCA have to accept that? He said, this, for a variety of reasons, the state is relatively flush with money right now. Isn't this a good time to ask for more money? That the OCA needs more bodies. We have a bigger population. We have people, with these other different courts. And he said, well, this is not impossible, but so I have set up a meeting next Monday with Anna, Assemblywoman Kellis, to sort of explore this and to see if there might be any appetite to push for higher funding to OCA in order specifically to help fund these wellness courts. The governor has said this is a priority. The chief judge has said this is a priority. So if it's a priority, you need to put some money into it. So that's the theory for that. So we'll see. As Scott Miller said, I didn't know it was impossible to get a 3rd county court. So we went ahead and tried, and we'll see how this goes. It's a multi-year effort. So I'll be passing the baton along. Any questions on those items so far? Okay.
Just with respect to redistricting, I wanted to say that I thought that GO did a really great job and got us a terrific local redistricting commission. And I guess we should all thank Amanda.
Sounds good. Agree. The NISAC, the Climate Action Committee, I have been on for a number of years on the Climate Resiliency Committee. That is now transforming into something called the Climate Action Committee. County Executive Patrick Ryan from Ulster County is going to be chair of it. And he has, and I've asked Steve Aquario to sort of elevate the committee to a full committee instead of being a task force that can't pass resolutions. And he has accepted that recommendation. He's taken it to the new president of NISAC. And at the December board meeting, they're going to vote to turn this committee into a full committee and call it the Climate Action Committee. So it'll be, right there on the schedule with the other committees that meet during every conference. There will be an effort to try to get more elected officials as members of the committee, and there will be every opportunity finally to be able to pass resolutions to set policy for NISAC related to climate action. So it's a big step. I'm really pleased that Steve Aquario got behind this and that he supported it. The committee is meeting one more time this calendar year, December 15th at 4:00, in case any of you is interested. I'll certainly let other legislators know. I think it's can be a really important committee, and I hope people from Tompkins will pick it up and decide to get engaged in it. You know, it's really we can continue pushing above our weight when we sit in on those meetings. I mean, Henry, you've seen it, the public safety. We don't necessarily get things passed. We sometimes get changes made to things that might not quite fit our values. But, you know, we can also bring forward things that aren't otherwise on the agenda. And certainly this committee is one opportunity to do that. Speaking of committees, I put into your packet the document about NACO committees. I really want to encourage every one of you to pick something out and join it at NACO. It's not hard. It's easy to apply. Steve Aquario would have to kind of sign off, and that's easy. He's happy to have any New York legislator, elected officials get involved at NACO. I've been involved for the last year or two in the Rural Action Caucus, the Resilient Counties Advisory Board, the Environment, Energy, and Land Use Steering Committee, and have found those to be really interesting. And you know, it's actually fun. I mean, and especially with Zoom. I mean, I don't know that before Zoom, I don't know if these committees, how they met. Maybe they're just conference calls, but using this platform that we're now well familiar with, you actually meet people from around the country. I mean, I've gotten friends with somebody in Austin, Texas. I've met people and had set up other conversations with people in New Mexico and California. And does anybody know the Fosbury flop, the high jumping? Henry, you know what that is? Okay.
Yes.
On one of these calls, I saw a guy's name. It was Michael Fosbury. I was like, Michael Fosbury. So I go and in the middle of the meeting, I kind of Google Michael Fosbury.
It's the same guy?
It's the same guy.
Same guy. Wow, he's good at the flop.
And he invented the flop, but he's a county legislator in like Wyoming or something. So in the chat, I went to him, "Are you the Fosbury flop guy?" And he said, "Yes, that's me." And we had a whole conversation during the meeting. So, and you know, you get somebody's individual email, you can establish a connection. So it's kind of fun at that level. And again, we can punch above our weight. There aren't enough legislators from New York. There aren't enough legislators from the Northeast, frankly, involved in these committees. There seems to be a preponderance from the Southeast and the West, maybe a lot of Texas.
So is this just another occasion when you beat your head against a wall?
No, because I've actually been able, in my little way, to change the conversation on a number of these things and to raise additional questions. And you know, if you find it's a waste of time, then you know you can always quit. But they always have speakers who start out, you know, the different meetings, and you learn a lot. I mean, I don't know if you remember the issue we had about metropolitan areas designated as 50,000 above or 100,000.
Right.
That's where I heard about that issue. And Fernando was aware of it, but he hadn't really elevated it, you know, hadn't really brought it to our attention. So that's where I heard about that. We passed a resolution, you know, we were part of a movement to get that changed, which we did. So I just really want to encourage folks. I know a number of staff members have been interested when I forwarded things on. There are a lot of opportunities here, and you know, I'd encourage you to take a look at these committees. It's been rewarding for me, so you learn a lot. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So any comments or questions on any of that? Okay, thanks. Committee members, Anybody have anything to toss our way for next meeting or anything else? Say last meeting. Okay. All right, thanks. We have the minutes of October 12th. Can I get a motion on those? Minutes? Moved by Henry, seconded by Mike Sigler. Discussion? All right, Deborah, you voting?
Sorry. Yeah, I wasn't there. So do I vote on these or not?
Yeah, you can vote. Yeah.
You can
Bless you.
vote, that's fine.
Thanks, Katrina. All right, all in favor of the minutes? Mike Sigler? That
Yes.
looks- Mike Lenny,
Yes.
Henry,
Yes.
and Deborah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm a yes, that's unanimous. Thank you. All right, Lisa, I see you've joined us.
Did.
Hi,
Hello.
how are you today?
I'm great. There's a lot going on. I was sorry to have missed this meeting. It looked like you had a great agenda. So fortunately, we have a standing leadership meeting that conflicts. I can provide a few updates. Looking forward to tonight's public hearing on the budget. Again, I'll just put out there for anyone listening that the RFP is still out for the county's recovery grant program. We're accepting questions that will be posted publicly through November 15th. And the final deadline is 1 p.m. on November 22nd. Based on the questions we're receiving, there's a lot of interest in the program. Just had a discussion regarding the incident this weekend at Cornell. Has prompted some discussion on our part here with our leadership team and Dominic Recchio, who has an interest in reconvening the public information officers locally, including our community partners at Cornell, the large employers, which we have been doing quite regularly, and COVID has since interrupted that. So I think that's something that we want to do just at a best practice to ensure that we're all coordinating in terms of our communication. That's it for me.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Comments or questions from folks?
Well,
Lisa,
yes, I have
go ahead, Henry.
Lisa, I know that you sent the email, you talked to Mike Stitley. How did that work in terms of that information flowing to you about this weekend?
Well, Mike was great in terms of, keeping me apprised of the situation and what I was able to share based on the incident commander at the scene. So it flowed directly from Mike. So that piece was pretty seamless.
And Mike was kept informed by by Cornell?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, because I had a number of people, and I was, like I said in my email to you, I was gonna call somebody to ask, but then your email popped up. And so it was great timing.
Sure, yeah.
Mike Lane?
Lisa, is there any update on the Cuga Lake flooding?
I continue to get alerts, flood alerts, but I've not heard anything since. I know Mike Stitley did go out and visit the residents who were directly impacted on Lagoda Park in Lansing. I don't have any updates since then.
I saw the day online that the flooding is going down.
Yes, I'm monitoring. I've noticed that as well. It's still above flood level stage, but it is going down. Luckily, we've had several days without rain.
Deborah, is this about your hand about this topic? You're muted. Deborah, you're muted.
It's going back to the bomb scare thing. I just had a,
Okay. All right, let me ask us about the flooding. I did hear on somewhere on the radio that yeah, that it's still, I think, a foot above flood level or something, but as we learned over email, et cetera, that this has to do with the whole system, and it's
Seneca River, yes.
yeah, we are all connected. Okay, Deborah, go ahead.
yeah, just, I had a soil and water meeting yesterday, and the poor woman on staff at Soil and Water who deals with flood issues and stream beds and watershed and drainage. I mean, she sounded so beaten down. I felt terrible for her. She said it's just been nonstop. She just, yeah. So yeah, we are all connected and we're all screwed unless we get this thing under control. But I wanted to go back to the incident with Cornell, because it's not clear to me in a situation like that, who does the actual on the ground, searches and verifications about whether there actually is a bomb. Is that Cornell's security? Is that the sheriff? Is that the city police? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's an incident commander, when that kind of is in charge at the scene, and then the flow of personnel flow down from that person. I believe in this case, the incident commander was a Cornell. I am interested. Didn't have a chance yesterday to speak with Mike Steitley because I'm very interested to kind of do an after action understanding a little more about how it, how things transpired and what we can learn from that. And so when I do that, I'm happy to share the details because, it was certainly a learning experience for me in this role as well. And I think the outcome was as good as it possibly could have been given the fact that it was a false alarm, but we can certainly learn from that.
Yeah, I think we'd all be interested in knowing because, we just don't know who staffs these things.
Sure. I believe there were multiple law enforcement entities that were called to the scene, were following the lead of the incident commander.
So do you know, does it follow some sort of jurisdictional hierarchy? I mean, wasn't the FBI involved? I mean, does the FBI take precedence over the state police? And I mean, does it go like that? Or is it like primary is the local hands-on, like Cornell? Do you know?
Well, again, we're testing my incident command structure, 101, 202. I believe that that whoever is appointed the incident commander, the next people to come on fall under that structure, regardless of, if they are higher up in the chain of command until such time that a new incident commander is appointed. But again, we're testing my my online skills from a couple of years ago. So again, I could stand the refresher myself.
But then who appoints the incident commander?
I think I think that it's the person who is in the highest ranking person who is in the jurisdictional agency that is first responding to the scene.
Okay.
But I do think that what would happen is if there were actually a bomb, the feds would take over. Just because they're happy to trample all over anybody. I worked for them, so I know.
I would think that since there were so many universities around the country involved here, that there'll probably be a lot of information sharing among the university level, at the university level about these things.
Yeah,
That'd be a good idea. Inquiring minds want to know, Lisa.
Okay, we'll get back on that.
And do you know, I'm also curious, like who kind of determined it was a hoax? But is that like the assembled multitudes, or is it the incident commander again kind of makes the call? And okay, that kind of question. Again, we're
Sure.
okay. Thanks. And you said Dominic wants to pull together the group. It's public information officers. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's something that is a role for the county communication director, public information officer, something that we have been doing quite regularly in the past that we're inspired to do again.
And who's in that? The town? I mean, the city has a
Sure. Yes.
Okay. The
Sure.
city, I don't know who else has this. The law enforcement tend to have. Okay. All right. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. When we were happy to have Amanda Spellacy on the call earlier, and she was we weren't sure we were going to get her, but we got her, and she was talking. We picked her brain about the funding for the that will be coming through with the infrastructure bill in particular. And sort of long story short, you can go back and look at the tape, but long story short, it's the mostly through not entirely, but mostly through the mechanisms that exist with state funding of DOT projects, et cetera. But there will also be various grant programs, for example, through NYPA or NYSERDA. So stay tuned was the big message. So
Great, I'll watch.
right. Thank you. All right. Thanks so much, Lisa. Appreciate your being here. Anything else for the good of the committee? Would you like us to spend the December meeting digging into the cannabis issue? And there's a lot to know about, which we've barely talked about, really. Is that something I could get, maybe Ryan or Patrick Cummings could come back, or is that worth it?
It doesn't sound like the regulatory process is far enough along, quite honestly, to be helpful.
I'd like to hear more about that mental health bill, which he offered to talk to us more about.
Okay.
Yeah, do we know from TCOG how many villages or towns are opting out?
Lisa, do you have any idea how many villages or towns are talking about opting out of the cannabis dispensaries?
I do not know.
Okay.
The Rockefeller Institute sent out they're studying this as to what they didn't give a lot of figures, but there was something online that came to me from the Rockefeller Institute talking about the different requirements. But locally, I think maybe Homer town or village may have opted out. But that's
Homer opted in. It opted in.
It opted in.
Well, you don't have to do anything to opt in.
Right.
You just have to, I guess.
They decided not to opt out. Then maybe how that works.
Yeah, but they don't know whether they're going to get a dispensary because of the limitations again in the county, I believe.
And it's also not just dispensary, but it's like lounges.
Right.
There are two different things that you can, for example, decide that you're perfectly happy with having retail outlets, but you don't want to have on-site consumption facilities. I guess it's kind of like the difference between are you going to have liquor stores or are you going to have bars?
Mm-hmm.
So you can decide you don't want bars, but you do want liquor stores. It just, to me, it makes more sense. I mean, I guess I kind of hijacked the village's process, at least the way it was reported by.
It's like a dime.
Yeah. But, they're two very different issues. And I honestly don't know why you would want to allow on-site consumption when people would then be able to sit there and get stoned and then get in a car and drive somewhere. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. So
we all have bars. Right?
Bars.
yeah, neither do bars. You're right.
Yeah. Mike Sigler?
Well, just to kind of dovetail off of that, I'm a little curious as to what I guess the policing will do. I mean, when I'm walking from the county legislature over to the market there just to buy a little food between meetings, right? When we had that break. I mean, you've got 14-year-olds smoking weed in DeWitt Park. If they were all sitting around drinking beers, I'm pretty sure the police would come and say something. But, you know, because it's weed, nobody really wants to touch it. And these are young. I mean, I'm not talking, 21-year-olds and above. I'm talking, they're clearly young people, like very young people. So I don't know.
Do the police do anything in Ithaca?
They only have 3 people on right now, so probably
Yeah,
that's probably not
seriously,
high
I'm not
priority.
sure it's going to make a difference. And those 14-year-olds, shouldn't be doing that now. And even when cannabis is legal, they still shouldn't be doing it because they're underage. I suspect nothing will change.
So, all right, so interesting, but you're not necessarily interested in a, major part of our next meeting about cannabis, but it's something to watch. All right, well.
I think the stuff we most need to know is, will there be more information about the money flow on the Infrastructure Act? Where are we with Build Back Better and a continuing resolution? Yeah, I mean, I think there's stuff that's more urgent, Martha.
Okay. All right. And, our next meeting is after the magic December 3rd. So there might be.
That's right.
To talk about.
So we could have a how screwed are we meeting?
That sounds great. A real holiday pick me up. Awesome. Well, I guess, from the way Amanda went through the whole thing, my sense is they're really interested in making sure everybody knows what's in the legislation that they do pass. So let's hope that she has some good news that they're motivated to make time for her to share in December, second week of December. So, all right, if there's anything else, I am really concerned about the voting bill as well. So, I guess one thing at a time, but we'll see what happens.
Mike, is your hand still up or is that an old hand?
An old hand. It's all wrinkly. See, it's all.
All right, Katrina, thank you. Wait, is your hand up again now? Come on,
No.
you're confusing me.
He's just showing us his wrinkles.
Yay, Mike knows where his hand button is. Okay. All right, Katrina, thank you so much for being with us, supporting our meeting. Lisa, thanks for coming and sharing with us. And